Hello again. Now I'm going to be showing you how to coat your piece of paper with the Cyanotype solution. This is a tricky part, I suppose, or the most tricky part where you actually have to apply it quite evenly, but I'll show you exactly what to do. What you'd need is a brush. I use these hog hair brushes, which work very well in my opinion. What the advantage of these brushes is that they take quite a bit of charge. In other words, they absorb quite a bit of liquid as you're applying it. So rather than having a very thin brush, so you have to work it quite hard. The next thing you need is a little bowl to mix your solution in. I've got an old sugar bowl, which is really handy because if I mix up some stuff and I don't use it all, what I do is I just put the lid on top and I put it in a cupboard or in a dark space. So then when I need some, I've got some ready anyway. So just to mix your solution, you just get your two bottles, you get your A and you get your B, and you put equal amounts of A and equal amounts of B together, give it a bit of a swish, and then you will have a light sensitive solution. So in its state in A and B, these are not light sensitive, so once you mix it together they become light sensitive. So you got your brush, you got your solution, and you need a piece of paper. Generally speaking, when you start printing, you might want to coat 3 or 4 pieces of paper. So you got a bit of stock, otherwise you constantly have to kind of coat it, because it takes about 15 to 20 minutes for the solution to dry on the paper. So otherwise you have to, then you can keep on printing once you've actually coated all the paper. I'll also show you the difference between coating a cold pressed piece of paper with a bit of tooth, with a bit of texture, versus a piece of hot pressed paper. This is hot pressed, smooth. I'll just show you this because hot pressed paper, it resists the solution a little bit, so you have to work a bit harder, but I'll show you what to do. Okay, let's get to the brushing part. Okay, here we go. You don't need to be in complete darkness when you do this. Semi-darkness is pretty good, so you don't need to sit into the dark room or something like that, but a semi-dark space is good. The stuff is not very light sensitive, so when you're coating it, you're all right. So I'm in my studio and I've just got my curtain sort of drawn, so you can see it's still a bit of daylight pouring in. So don't do it out in the sun, because then you actually, you're exposing the solution as you're applying it to the paper, which is not the best thing to do. So I've got my stuff mixed, I've got my hog hair brush, and I've got a piece of paper here. So you dip your brush into the solution, and then you paint it on. What you'll find is that it's got no resistance, so it's very much like painting with water as such. So what you want to try and do is get a nice and even coat of the solution onto the paper. Now if you are going to be really working the brush like I'm doing here, you simply don't have enough solution on your piece of paper. So don't kind of try and work it too hard, it needs to go quite smoothly. The opposite of that is when you're applying too much, and then you're going to get these puddles. So puddles are no good because it's simply too thick, and you're going to be applying it like this, and you're always going to have this excess stuff. So if that happens, if you have a piece of paper towel, just simply put your brush on the paper towel to absorb the excess solution. Then you can probably make it a bit bigger like this. So even coating is one thing. The next thing, don't work the brush too hard. And if you have excess, like puddles, like here and like there and there, that's going to be uneven because that's going to be bluer than that. So you're going to have you can work with it if it's as a creative sort of an endeavor. It might it's worth experimenting with. But if you want a nice even coat, make sure you actually apply it evenly and don't work the brush too hard. The next thing is your edges as well. Obviously your edge is going to be part of your work, so you're either going to have some sort of rustic sort of an edge, or you can even use a non or low tack tape to actually tape off an area as well if you want to have that straight edge. Of course the organic edge or the painterly edge works quite nicely for most cyanotypes. But sometimes maybe when you're doing a negative, which I sometimes do, I do like to have a straight edge rather than the painterly edge. So this was a piece of cold pressed paper. I'll just show you the hot pressed paper and how differently it sort of goes onto the paper, which I've got right here. So this is hot pressed paper, so it's very smooth. So if I dip my brush again and I get the excess off like this by squeezing it onto the side, if you have a look, it sort of sits quite differently. It sort of, see how it repels? So you have to, with hot pressed paper, work it quite hard in order to get a nice even coat. And sometimes also what happens is you can actually, on hot pressed paper, you can actually apply quite a thin coat. So you might wonder why when you have a thin coat. Well, what's going to happen is that this is going to be a much more lighter blue rather than a much darker blue. So just consider for a fact that if you're applying it thicker, that's going to be a lot more blue. If you're going to be applying it thinner, it's going to be a lot less blue, or less intense blue. What you can also do if you want to get a very, very saturated blue, what you can do is you can double, triple, quadruple coat your piece of paper as well. The only thing that you need to do though is make sure that the first coat is completely dry before you apply the second coat. Let that dry, etc., etc. So the steps need to be, it needs to be dry, then you can apply the second coat. Also, just to keep in mind, is that if you do go triple, quadruple coating, what will happen is that your exposure time is going to be double, quadruple as long as well. So you might be sitting in the sun for quite a while. But having said that, it's definitely worth it to experiment with. Okay, so now I'm going to put these to dry somewhere. The drying part is kind of important because what you want to try and do is keep it in a dark spot. So either in a drawer or in a room that's completely dark, because this is going to be, if I put this now, just leave it drying here in this particular light, it will start exposing somewhat. But yeah, so find a really dark spot and put your piece of paper there and let it dry. Generally it takes about 20 minutes to dry. You'll feel it once it's dry, it's sort of bone dry. You don't feel any kind of coldness of the liquid anymore. Of course, depending where you are and how warm it is, it will of course dry a lot quicker in midsummer than it does in midwinter. Okay, we'll be back with the exposure part. Great, bye.